Today we are discussing stealing the Declaration of Independence in the movie National Treasure, starring Nicolas Cage.
I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
I wanted to start off talking about Ben Gates' motivation, why he is doing this in the first place, and why he is treasure hunting. Did you guys catch what his motivation was for why he's doing all of this?
I think he just wants to get the Gates name back in good standing. His dad has been searching for this treasure. His grandfather did too, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they've always been known as the crazy treasure hunters that aren't getting anything or going anywhere with it. So he wants to get this so he can say, hey, look, his dad was correct. This did happen.
My family's not nuts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, that's interesting because he didn't even really seem to me to have an eye for the treasure itself. Like, he didn't seem like he's pursuing this to get rich at all, although some of the people on his team are. And it's interesting because stuff like this, stuff like your family is seen as crazy because of some mission you've taken on or something you're putting out there in the academic world. That does actually happen to people throughout history and still now. Joan of Arc, for instance, believed God told her she was going to liberate her people, right? So she wanted an audience with the king, and everybody in her town thought she was nuts. She's 15 years old. Like, what are you doing? And, well, she ended up actually doing just that. Like, she was able to lead her people to France to freedom from England, I believe, and ended up dying. But Galileo and Copernicus are two guys who started to believe that the Earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. And of course, they were ridiculed for that. And in modern times, like the theology professor I learned from suggested that something in the Old Testament was being read incorrectly and that there was a mistake in some of the later translations. He turned out to be right, but man, people came after him and called him a heretic and all this stuff. So this is something that throughout history people do. So what Ben is going through in this movie, I'm like, oh, I've seen that happen, and we've been taught about that in history classes. So I think that's a really interesting motivation, like wanting to clear your name and just be seen as somebody who's not crazy, right?
Right. Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I saw that he has a second motivation too. And this one sort of has a spiritual theme to it. When he's reading the Declaration of Independence, he's standing there in the lobby. He says this, and I take it that he totally believes this and buys into it. He's paraphrasing what the Declaration says, and he says, if there's something wrong, those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. And that's when he's like,
I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
So I thought that was awesome, but that whole, like, I have this responsibility. If I see something that's wrong, well, I'm in position to do something about it. So I should, right?
Right.
You're trying to do good and help the world. I thought that was,
Yeah.
it's a pretty good character, right? They're making him pretty wholesome.
Pretty much. But I mean, like his explanation is, I'm going to steal it to keep it from being stolen.
Yeah.
It's kind of
how
you got to look at it. It's like, well, okay.
He has some gray to him, but he is really presented as a good guy, a great guy.
Oh, yeah.
Trust, yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's got a lot of respect for history and obviously very knowledgeable about it. And he likes to preserve that. So, yeah, I mean, he's a good guy. He's doing something that you probably shouldn't do, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. I'd be like, hey, we have copies of this thing. Like, does it matter that the original is lost? Which gets into the power of symbols.
Right. And it really does. There's a rough draft of it at the Library of Congress that you can look at. The one that he's going to steal, is one of the actual Declaration of Independence letters. Yeah.
One of them?
They made several. There are several copies made. That would probably be the original one. but the Declaration's kind of, it's interesting because you have the 56 names signed on it, and not one time during the entire Continental Congress were all 56 men in the same room together.
Really?
Never happened. I mean, they're all over the place. There's a war going on, right? So when they ratified it and they had to sign it, I think it took them like almost 2 years to get every signature actually on it.
Oh, jeez.
Really?
Right.
Because you had to pass it around. It wasn't like everybody was in Philadelphia. So it took a while to get every signature on it. So they had to they issued different copies out to newspapers around the country so that they could be read aloud. So everybody had knew it. They knew that they were going to declare it and send it to King George. But yeah, that picture, there's a painting by Trumbull. It's on the back of the $2 bill. And it's, Hancock's at his desk, and there's Jefferson, and then there's John Adams. And they're all up there getting ready to sign, and Ben Franklin standing there. Then all the other delegates are all in the back of the room. Never happened.
Wow.
So, but when you go into the National Archives and you see this one here, like mine is obviously a copy. This is what it would look like. It's a lot bigger, and you can't read it. The ink is like gone on it. It's you can't make out hardly anything on that. So, yeah, so I think it's really, you need to preserve that as much as you can. It's the symbol of our freedom. I mean, that's where our country started. That's how important of a document that is. So to say like, if that one's gone, I can put a replacement in there and nobody would notice. You would notice. You would, 100% notice. That thing is under glass that's so thick right now because of how it's deteriorating, because it's so old and the ink is gone. So in the movie, when he actually does steal it and they're looking at it, there's no way they could have read it, for one. But he needed it because it had all that. He believed that there was that hidden map on the back side of it. So that's why he would have had to take it. But yeah, getting a copy that you buy in the store and then switching it out like they wouldn't know, they would know.
Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
There is a scene that I love before he steals it, when he's at the gala, right? Mm-hmm. So he starts making a scene in front of this girl that he likes, right? What was her name?
Yeah. Abigail Chase.
Abigail, which are also historical names. Abigail Adams. Abigail was a big popular name back there. Chase was a delegate to the Continental Congress from New York.
Okay.
And when Abraham Lincoln was shot, they chased Booth. So, history.
That must be why. That must be.
I know my history.
Yeah, all their names. Benjamin Franklin Gates. There's Horatio Gates. He was a general in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. So about everybody in this movie's got some kind of a historical name.
Okay. That's kind of cool. It's an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Oh, so do I. I mean, John.
John Hancock.
Close.
Yeah, so when he's at the gala and he's talking to Abigail, and that other guy walks up. So Ben Gates starts saying, had we lost the war, the signees, they would have all been hanged and their entrails would have been burned. And he kind of goes into this gruesome detail. And I thought that was kind of a funny point, because it's true, man. Like, you win, you're called freedom fighters. You lose, and you're a traitor. And the line between like hero and villain in history, it is so thin. Like, did they or did they not do something bad? Is that really determined by if you win the war or not? Like, that's an interesting concept.
Oh, it really is. I mean, everybody who signed their name on this piece of paper, in a way, could have been signing their death certificate. Because if America lost, every one of these guys would have been tried for treason and hung. Every single one of them. Yeah. So Ben Franklin had said during the Continental Congress that, we either hang together or you're most sure we will hang separately. So he knew that, we're going to be tried for treason. This is it. And it all depends on what side you're on. If you were there were people in America who were still loyal to Britain during the war. And, they thought we're British subjects and you're rebelling against us and you're the bad guys. So yeah, it just all depends on your point of view, I guess.
Yeah. Did you think it was funny that in the middle of this heist, like the stakes are so high, you cannot risk getting caught. He stops to talk to this girl that he's talked to once, who works there. So it's risky to talk to her, like
Yeah.
because she could get him caught. Why do you think he did that?
I think it's more of a distraction type
Yeah.
deal, maybe to throw her off that he's not up to something, I guess.
Well, she would have recognized him, so
Right.
maybe it actually had a logical purpose because she saw him earlier in the day.
Yeah.
So if she did see him, she would wonder, "What are you doing here?"
Right.
Huh. I kind of wondered if it's like, like he can't help himself because like that desire to connect with people and like connect with a woman is so strong that in the middle of this thing he cannot help like almost risking sabotaging himself by talking to this girl.
Yeah, I almost think
Yeah.
he's got more of a calculated way of thinking. I think everything he does has a purpose.
Oh, so you don't think that he like for a moment kind of lost his calculating self over this? Interesting. Okay, so apparently I was missing a piece, but I thought that Ben Gates went up to Abigail because he had this crush on her, because before he goes to the gala, he sends her this missing campaign button. Whose was it?
George Washington's.
George Washington's missing campaign button. She's got all of them but this one. So he sends that to her, probably, I take, to impress her or out of respect for a fellow history buff. So then he goes to the gala, and Drew, you mentioned he's actually trying to get her fingerprints to get access to the Declaration. Well,
Correct.
I noticed he got a fingerprint, but I didn't make that connection there. I thought he just went up to her because he was crushing on her, but that was because of what he did in the previous scene. So interesting.
Yeah, he had a plan the whole time. So
so you're right. He is calculating.
Yeah, very calculating.
Always. I mean, even after he got out of there, he knew I ran my credit card. I can't go back to my place.
Yeah.
So they made an alternate or made a detour and went to Dad. So he's always thinking a couple steps ahead.
I wondered. So right then, he knew he had to buy that copy of the Declaration in the gift shop. But then later, they steal his dad's car. And I thought, oh, dude, you're probably going to get caught now. You have to ditch that car or you have to get a different car. But maybe he didn't do that because he didn't want to steal a car and you can't rent one. So maybe he just felt like, I know I'm going to get caught. I'll drive my dad's car as long as I can before I get caught. What do you think? Like that's not a smart move today if you're going to pull a heist, but there's not as many cameras around in 2004.
Right.
B, all he has to do, I mean, I don't even remember what kind of car it was, but it wasn't anything flashy. It was probably just a normal run-of-the-mill car. All you have to do is switch the plates.
Yeah. But he didn't, though, right?
They probably just didn't go into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought that if he was as smart as he is about planning the heist, he would have planned the getaway a little bit better. I would have thought he would put a fake...
Well, I think and like you said, his plan was altered. He had a different plan in mind, so he had to, make everything up on the fly.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure he switched out a license plate, did something, so no one would see his plate and pull him over, I guess.
What did you think of the heist itself?
That was pretty cool. I obviously, like when I went to the National Archives, you go in and they have all the documents underneath that glass. And I doubt that they actually filmed in the National Archives. I guess it's possible because they did, they film at like Lincoln Memorial and outside the Capitol and all that stuff all the time. So I don't know if they did or not, but it looked exactly like the archives. Like,
I'm sure they got.
They probably had some kind of permission. It looked exactly like it. Now, whether or not all that stuff that they did where the Declaration is lowered and sealed into a vault, I don't know how true that is. That wasn't part of the tour. But it was
probably not like that either because there's no way they could get that information. They wouldn't put it in a movie.
Right.
So everyone has it. So
somebody watched Mission Impossible during that segment. And they wrote that into the film.
But I thought it was really interesting how they did that and how he was able to get in and try to get it and then get out. I thought it was really well done. It's very intense, and it makes for a real fun sequence.
Yeah, having not seen the movie since middle school, I'd forgotten what happened. And so I didn't know exactly what was going to happen when they're trying to escape or how they're going to get away. But I was sitting there during the car chase part thinking, wow, like I feel a good deal of tension in this getaway. And that's pretty good this is sort of, I know it's 2004, but in my head, it's a 90s-esque style movie. Mm-hmm. And it built good tension.
Yeah.
So that's a success.
Mm-hmm. It did have the typical, and again, I don't know too much about computers and stuff like that, but it does seem like every movie has somebody who can walk up to a computer and break into NORAD.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let me plug this in here. Okay, I got control of Washington, D.C. What do you need done? It's like, that's a little too easy sometimes when you can control every single camera that that's in the building and nobody knows, and you can do this from a bathroom or a sewer or something like that.
Yeah, that guy was a top-notch hacker.
Yeah,
because he could get you into anything.
I still don't know what his job was.
My old next door neighbor, he was a programmer, and it seemed like he was pretty into that. For instance, what's the Amazon speaker that people are afraid listens in on them?
Alexa.
Yeah,
Alexa. So
I don't want to say it. She's right over there.
He would run tests on his to see how much data it was uploading, to see if it was sending stuff to people that it shouldn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was employed by the government to work on the healthcare site, so he was managing a huge project, knew what he was doing, but he could do all kinds of interesting stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, he's the type of guy that would do this. But yeah, to do it in that time, that's pretty. AI can't crack passwords that fast. As far as I know, when LastPass representatives go around to train at companies, tell people how to keep their computers more secure, if you've got a 24-character password, they say it'll take a computer like a year and a half to crack that.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, but they tell you to change your password once a year. So it does make you wonder, like, you have to give that to the movie as a premise or the movie's no fun, but it makes you wonder, is that...
I don't know. I swear my phone listens to me. I swear. Yesterday, my daughter was just humming the song, and it turns out it's the theme song to the Banana Splits, the old 60s TV show. And I think a lot of people have heard the theme song without ever seeing the show. I'm like, are you doing the Banana Splits? And she goes, yeah, whatever. And later on that afternoon, I'm just kind of scrolling through Facebook, and there's the theme song to the Banana Splits. I'm like, are you freaking
Yeah. I've had that happen.
It's like,
it freaks me out.
Really? Okay. If I think of something, I see an ad for it. So, high-tech stuff.
It's out there.
It's out, yeah.
So after the heist, they go to his dad's house, Ben's dad's house, right? And it's kind of during one of these talks that I realize Ben's other kind of motivation. And this is kind of like a minor plot point in the film, but he feels like a son who has disappointed his dad, and his dad sort of looks down on him too, because his dad has kind of lost faith in the treasure, right? He thinks that
absolutely.
this treasure hunt is just a waste of your life, and his son is wasting his life. So he's lost faith in it, and his son still has faith in it. And I wonder if he's trying to find this treasure to show his dad that he is, well, he's doing it to show his family, clear his family's name, right? But is he
Right.
also trying to show his dad, like, hey, like, your dad wasn't crazy, and I'm somebody, I'm worthy, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was more to help out his dad as much as it was to prove to the world. I mean, I can understand wanting something that big for ever and then never getting it and losing faith. I mean, that happened to a lot of Cubs
So
fans.
Doug's a Cubs fan. And he's experienced it before.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of people. I mean, if you really think about it, 90% of Cardinal fans in Illinois are just old Cub fans who gave up. So
Lies.
I mean, but no, I digress. But yeah, I lived with the Cubs for over 40 years until I got something. I can't, if you do it for 50 years, 60 years, how bad can it get? Especially if it's your complete life. I mean, 40 years with, a sport that plays 8 months out of the year, you don't get that invested in it. But if that's your job, if that's your life, is to find this, and then 50 years later you still did nothing, I can see giving up.
Yeah.
Be
I
hard
don't
not
know.
to.
When Purdue went 1-11 one year, I was like, I wasted every Saturday this fall watching a 4-hour football game.
We're Illinois fans. We do that every fall.
Yeah, we do that every fall, so it's all good.
Well, Ben's dad, he did say something interesting. He said, the treasure is just a myth to keep the British occupied. Now, I noticed how believable, potentially realistic, his theory was. That's kind of interesting, because you've got two ideas. There's this crazy invisible code on the back of the Declaration, and then his dad has the other side of that. He has a realistic belief there that that could have potentially happened.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they did a lot of stuff like that during wars and everything. I mean, if you get somebody's attention, it's like, oh, a lot of gold would make things a lot easier. Let's send 2 platoons to go find that if it's there. And if they're chasing down ghosts, those guys aren't in the fight. So,
Yeah.
you hear stories of, well, both sides, but, you always heard stories in World War II how Hitler had all these different people doing different crazy things to try to make them stronger and stuff, like whether it was real or not. All that time and money spent on that, what would have happened if he hadn't done that,
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
actually going to come back at the beginning of part 2.
Yeah.
Like right at the beginning, Nicolas Cage, Ben Gates, he's giving this presentation on, I guess, the plot of movie 1. And he said, if the South had found the treasure, then they might have won the war. So I guess they build that treasure plot into the Civil War, and they say, well, if the other side got this treasure, they would have won. So
yeah, little swings like that, all it takes is something like finding a treasure or building a super soldier.
Yeah,
if it works, all of a sudden,
like
tide turns.
Yeah.
The treasure he was talking about in part 2, though, is different than this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's getting distracted by, you're not focusing on the main goal anymore. So, and I mean, they used to do that with, military tactics, were to let something leak that we're moving our forces this way, and the British will focus on. I think Washington did this. He was stranded on. He was in Brooklyn, and he couldn't go anywhere, and he caused a diversion for the British to look somewhere else. And in the dead of night, he snuck all of his troops off of Long Island and got out of there. He had to do that. He did that a couple times with, like, the Battle of Trenton when he crossed the Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
He had to cause diversions that, hey, we're going to attack over here, and then I'm actually going to go do it now, and it gets them looking elsewhere. So yeah, that could definitely have been a diversion.
Yeah. So the dad here, Ben's dad's lost faith in the treasure, but Ben, I really liked what he said about his belief in the treasure. He basically tells Abigail, he says something like he keeps pursuing it because he wants to know the treasure isn't just something in his head or in his heart. And he says, this is what I liked. He says, I don't know that the treasure is real, but I hope it's real. And I liked that. So he's not extreme on the other side with, like, blind faith. He is hoping. He's not sure if he's right, but he's following this anyways. I think that's kind of an interesting concept.
That's how I feel about Bigfoot. I don't know if he's real, but I kind of like to think he is.
I hope he's real. Yeah.
But I hope he is.
Yeah. So where did they go in the film? I can't remember. Where it's in Pennsylvania, I believe, where the clock tower is?
It's Independence Hall in Philadelphia. That's where the Continental Congress got together. It's where the Declaration of Independence was presented. It's where it was kind of signed. I mean, it was the capital of the United States for a while until they had to relocate to New York because the British kept coming in. But yeah, it's Independence Hall.
So did you like how the clue was in the $100 bill?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. With a little time up on the clock. That's the time that you have to be there. Which that's one place I've never been and I'd like to go.
But you had to factor in daylight savings time, or you'd be standing there at the wrong time.
Correct, because they didn't have daylight savings time back then.
Yeah.
And we don't anymore.
Or you could just go down there and look for the Mason symbol on the bricks.
Yeah, if I ever go to Philadelphia, I'm going to see if they can let me up there so I can take a look.
If I ever see a brick with a Mason symbol on it, I'm going to rip it off the wall and look behind it for treasure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I remember they got that clue because they looked on the back of the Declaration and they found a reference to Silence Dogood.
Yeah.
Who was Ben Franklin, he was 16 years old. He was just trying to get letters published, and he could not get anything published. So he started writing under the identity of a middle-aged widow named Silence Dogood. And he would drop these letters off under the door of his brother's printing press. And that's how they got published. And he left 14 about every week or two. He'd just drop a letter off under the door, and it got published, but they wouldn't publish his work. So he had to write under a false name.
Which it's a false name. I mean,
Silence
who
Dogood,
needs to shout silence?
It just sounds made up. But hey,
I do think that'd be funny. Like
maybe there were more people named like that.
Yeah, you're yelling at your kid, and you're like, silence. So before we wrap up here, this is the point where they get chased by Ian. They lose the Declaration, and then Ben is caught over the whole car thing, right? Should have switched the plates or done something. Should have painted it, spray painted it in the garage. So everything looks bad. Like their heist was successful, but they never make it to the treasure at this point. So any final thoughts before on the next episode? We're going to go into the treasure hunt itself, and then some of those historical themes, like the theme behind Solomon's Temple and what that has to do with the treasure. All that stuff's going to come back. So any last thoughts on this heist segment?
No. I mean, like you said, it was fun how they used actual history to make up some stuff. And I mean, obviously, if there was a single brick somewhere, anywhere on that building with the Mason symbol, somebody would have found that.
That's what I was
2 weeks after they put it in. Yeah. Oh, I wonder what's behind here.
So 3D bifocals.
Right. So, but It's a movie.
But it's fun.
Numb your mind. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, listeners, you got any comments on the heist? What you thought of Nicolas Cage's stealing the Declaration of Independence? Put it in the comments. We're going to be back soon with part 3. We're going to cover the treasure hunt sequence. So hit subscribe, and we will see you next time. Didn't he introduce the idea that...
Hold up, stop, hold up. Sorry, I got an animal fight going on here. I got 2 cats and a dog trying to get on my lap.
I wondered what was going on.
Hey, you need to quit.
I'm nervous for you.
You need to
Don't die.
All of you knock it off. God, that hurts.
Oh, man.
Get down. Get out. Get out of here.